You're sitting at your desk staring at a flashing screen and checking your phone for the 10th time before noon. You feel this heavy weight in your chest, this constant pressure to keep rushing, keep working, and keep tracking every single minute of your day. But for over 99% of human history, this endless race simply did not exist. Our ancestors lived in a completely silent world, under an open sky, sleeping on the cold ground, with nothing but a handbag of tools to their name. They had no clocks, no offices, and no bosses telling them what to do. So, how did they actually spend their days? And how did they find peace? The answer will completely change everything. We think we know about evolution, our mental health, and the real meaning of being alive. Let us peel back the layers of our modern world to find out. To understand how we ended up so exhausted, we have to look closely at the clues left behind in the dirt. In 1968, a young anthropologist named Richard Lee decided to camp out with the Kung Bushmen in the harsh Kalahari Desert. He did not just watch them from afar, but he tracked their every movement down to the exact minute with a notepad. Everyone in the academic world thought these people were constantly starving and working themselves to the bone just to stay alive. But when Richard Lee added up all his notes after months of tracking, the final numbers blew everyone away. He discovered that these people only spent about 15 hours a week gathering food and hunting animals. Think about that for a second, because it means they only worked about 2.5 hours a day. Your ancient ancestors did not have a landlord knocking on their door. They did not have a boss breathing down their neck, and they never had to pay rent. They did not even have a concept of weekends, because when you only work a couple of hours a day, your entire life feels like a long weekend. Let us picture what a typical morning actually felt like in their camp. When the sun gently comes up, the whole camp wakes up together without a single alarm clock. You open your eyes to the shifting temperature and the quiet sounds of people moving around you. You sleep on a simple animal hide thrown over some flattened grass, right next to a small fire that a friend kept alive during the dark hours. Everything you own in this life fits perfectly into one leather bag that you can carry on your back. A basic wooden bow, a sharp digging stick, a few hides, and maybe some beautiful glass beads given to you by a younger sister. There are only about 25 to 30 people living in your entire group, and you know every single one of them by name. You have known them since the day you were born, and your grandmother sleeps just a few feet away from your own sleeping children. There is no rush, and nobody is checking a clock, because the first hour of every single day is spent doing nothing but talking. Another researcher named Polly Wiesner spent years looking at these morning chats and found that casual conversation was the actual operating system of the tribe. This was not just cheap gossip to pass the time, but it was how they kept their society running smoothly. They talked about who was sleeping with whom, who took more than their fair share of meat the night before, who told the best joke, and who was too quiet because they might be falling sick. This simple morning talk was their entire legal system. They did not have police, they did not have courtrooms, and they did not build massive concrete prisons. Instead, the Kung kept order by using their voices and talking about each other. If a man hoarded food and refused to share, the others would make funny jokes about him until he felt ashamed and stopped doing it. If a woman broke a serious promise, the quiet whispers would travel to every single camp within a day's walk. If you became completely toxic and unbearable, eventually, no camp would let you sit by their fire. That banishment was the absolute harshest punishment a human could face back then, and it worked so well that they almost never had to use it. Sometimes even the scientists themselves had to learn this lesson the hard way. In 1969, Richard Lee wanted to thank the Kung for letting him live with them for so long, so he decided to give them a huge Christmas gift. He went to a nearby town, bought the biggest, fattest ox he could find, and brought it back to the camp. He stood there waiting for everyone to cheer and praise him for his extreme generosity. Instead, the Bushmen looked at the huge animal and laughed right in his face for weeks. They told him the ox was nothing but skin and bones, that the meat would taste awful, and that he had wasted everyone's time. Lee was deeply hurt and confused because he had checked the animal carefully, and it was a truly beautiful ox. He finally sat down with an old man from the tribe and asked him why everyone was being so cruel about his gift. The old man smiled and explained that when a hunter brings home a massive kill, the camp never celebrates. They openly mock the meat and tell the hunter his kill is small and useless. The bigger the animal, the harder they mock him. They do this on purpose to cut the hunter down to size so his pride does not ruin the peace of the camp. In their world, arrogance is a dangerous disease that can destroy a small tribe, so they use humor to keep everyone perfectly equal. By mid-morning, the men usually gather their bows and head out into the bush for the hunt. Hunting looks incredibly dramatic, but decades of data show it is also completely unreliable. A scientist named Frank Marlowe studied the Hadza tribe for years and found that on most days, hunters come back with absolutely nothing. A successful kill only happens once every few days, and a hunter might walk 20 miles through the heat track. A wounded animal for hours, lose it in the brush, and walk home with a sore back and an empty bag. When they do hit their mark, they use a dark poison made from the sap of a desert rose on their arrows, and they follow the animal until it falls. But even though the men get all the glory, they are not the ones keeping the camp alive. The women are the real heroes. Among the Hadza, the women provide well over half of the daily calories by gathering wild roots and berries. They go out in small groups every day digging and picking, and they always return with a steady supply of food that does not depend on luck. The men provide the occasional feast, but the women are the ones who actually feed the family. Interestingly, the most valuable gatherers are not the young strong mothers, but the grandmothers in their 50s and 60s. They bring back more food per day than anyone else, often walking miles into the bush well into their 70s. This discovery led to the famous grandmother hypothesis, which explains why human women live for decades after they stop having babies. Our species survived because these older women were able to gather enough food to keep their grandchildren alive. The little kids learn right alongside them, playing in mixed-age groups without any formal classrooms or adult interference. A 3-year-old plays with a small stick next to her mother, and by age 10, she is finding her own food and helping the family survive. They learn everything by watching, copying, and playing at the real work being done right next to them. When the afternoon heat hits, the entire camp slows down to a crawl, and absolutely nobody works through the midday sun. People nap in the deep shade, fix their tools, weave baskets, and gently pick lice out of each other's hair. It might sound strange to us, but this grooming takes hours and is just a beautiful excuse to stay physically close to the people they love. There is no shame attached to their bodies or their natural desires, and privacy is respected without creating heavy taboos. When arguments do happen, because they are human and not saints, they do not lock themselves in bitter court cases or suffer through years of toxic relationships. Since they can pack everything they own in 15 minutes, they simply vote with their feet and walk to another camp for a few weeks until the anger passes. They could do this easily because they were not tied down by a job or a 30-year home loan. As the evening fire starts to crackle, the whole camp gathers to share the food, and under their strict rules, sharing is not optional. The hunter who killed the animal often gets the worst piece of meat, while the rest is handed out to the group. Generosity is their only savings account, and keeping track of this deep social math is exactly what forced the human brain to grow so large. But what happens when the campfire fades and we are forced to look at the cold reality of our own lives? This ancient way of living was definitely not a perfect dream. They had to bury their tiny babies they suffered from terrible infections, and they wept over lost family members just like we do. They faced the raw, harsh edge of nature every single day. Yet as they sat together under the stars, they were entirely free from a very specific kind of modern torture. They never had to experience the slow crushing ache of waking up every single morning to go to a job they hated just to buy things they did not need to impress people they did not even like. They never lay awake at midnight staring at the ceiling feeling lonely while comparing their real lives to the fake happy pictures of strangers on a phone screen. In the late 1960s, scientists looked at this quiet lifestyle and called these early humans the original wealthy society. They did not mean wealth in terms of money, because these people owned absolutely nothing but a few sticks and hides. They meant they were rich in the one resource that modern humans can never seem to buy, and that resource is time. We made a massive trade over the last few thousand years. We chose to leave the forest, and we built a giant civilization. We got incredible life-saving wins like warm houses, running water, and amazing medicine that keeps our children from dying before they turn 5. Nobody wants to give up hospitals and run back into the wild bush, but we almost never talk about the dark side of that bargain. To get all this comfort, we quietly invented a trap. We invented agriculture, and then we invented the concept of a long work week that someone else completely owns. We invented bosses' schedules, mortgages, and endless monthly bills that keep us running on a wheel until we die. You are carrying their exact body today. You inherited the very same nervous system that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in the quiet forest. Your brain still craves real sun-deep sleep, physical touch, long conversations around a fire, and hours spent doing absolutely nothing. We are still hunter-gatherers underneath our clothes, but we just stopped living like them. So when you feel completely exhausted by the endless modern hustle, please remember this simple truth. You are not lazy, and you are not broken. You are just a human being running ancient survival software inside a crowded concrete machine. Your daily anxiety is not a personal failure, but it is just your DNA screaming for a slower pace and a smaller tribe. We cannot easily tear down this modern world, and we probably do not want to. But we can choose to step off the clock, even for just an hour, to sit with our loved ones and let ourselves breathe without feeling guilty. If your ancient brain felt a deep sense of peace listening to this story, please leave a like and share your thoughts below. Let us keep this meaningful conversation alive by subscribing to our digital camp. Thank you for resting here with us, and we will see you by the fire next time.